back their claim or cease peddling them. Majority MPs today held a press conference with which they also defended BOST's decision to sell what the company has described as off-spec fuel to two unlicensed companies, saying it yielded the country the highest possible earnings from the sale of such fuel in the country's history. Here are excerpts of the press conference from earlier this morning before we cross over to Parliament for a response from the minority.
In the face of the contamination, the sale of the product at 1.30 pesos per litre yielded 6,500,000 Ghana cedis, which represents a shortfall of 2.25 million Ghana cedis, and not the conjoined figure of 14.25 million Ghana cedis. The NDC has alleged in their press statement that under no circumstance should BOST experience such high level of contamination as we are witnessing. The truth of the matter, without justifying the recent event though, is that in 2014, under the NDC, a similar contamination occurred. The quantity involved was 4.6 million liters. In 2015, still under the NDC, another contamination occurred. The quantity involved was 9.9 million liters. 2016 witnessed the mother of all contaminations. The quantity involved amounted to 12 million liters. Clearly, therefore, the statement by the minority led by Honorable Amakufibua and Honorable Dr. Kwabena Donko is palpable falsehood. It does appear that there has been a lot of rot at BOST, and for that reason, we agree that we require a high-powered committee to investigate this and other related improprieties, determine the extent to which these affect and have affected the company and the economy and efficiency of BOST, and whether their operations are being managed in accordance with sound business principles and prudent commercial practices. In the interest of probity and accountability, we call on government to institute probe into the activities of BOST since 2009.
That is the majority's position. We will soon hear the minority's response on this matter. Well, they have maintained that the Managing Director Alfred Obeng should be interdicted. But if you'd recall, the stance of the majority today appears to be in sync with that of the Workers' Union, who sang their own part of the chorus yesterday at a press conference. Here is a refresher before we head to Parliament for those responses.
Unionized staff of the Bulk Oil Storage Company wants President Akufo-Addo to intervene in what is turning out to be an attempt to implicate the BOST board in a sale of contaminated fuel to unlicensed firms. At the press conference addressed by Secretary of BOST, Unionized staff Godfred Newton-Amo, they declared their unflinching support for the Managing Director Alfred Obeng.
The unionized staff of BOST are solidly behind the MD because we believe the agreed selling price, i.e. 1.30 pesos, is very competitive. We wish to establish that the stakeholders were consulted in the processes leading to the sale of this product, that is Ghana Revenue Authority. We believe that this misinformation is a deliberate attempt to destroy the integrity of the MD, and most importantly, stop the MD from going ahead with the ongoing probes into numerous malfeasance in the past contracts.
They also maintain that the questions about some of the fuel getting onto the market is untrue, because according to them, they only know of 471,000 liters that was actually moved to Zoop Oil. And beyond that, the rest of the product is actually with them here at BOST, following concerns that was raised. Indeed, to a very large extent, the committee that has been set up is somewhat biased because of the OMCs and BDCs who have interest within the downstream markets in the oil sector, and therefore they are asking for this to be reconstituted.
The formation of the committee, which are supposed to be looking into this matter, because we believe that the members, some of the members on that committee is they have an issue of conflict of interest. Why? Because some of them are direct competitors to our operation, which they have also demonstrated with all actions.
Can you be specific? Yeah. When you say they have interest and therefore it's going to be a conflict of interest.
The BDC representative, the OMC representatives, they are in direct competition with BOST. Even though they do different things, BOST talk for the nation for strategic reserve reasons. We do trading activities, which they also engage in trading. So that aspect, which they have demonstrated over time, that they wish BOST stop that side, it is worrying that these people are also on the committee.
The secretary added that the ongoing brouhaha regarding contaminated fuel is merely a tactic to prevent the new managing director from uncovering rot under the previous BOST administration.
As we speak, a contract concerning the construction of our head office was $39 million dollars. And as we speak, the contractors have come to the MD ever since the probe started to tell him that don't abrogate the contract. We are ready to reduce it by 19 million. Yes. So why would any contractor take such a risk if due diligence was done?
Is this not a mere face-saving mechanism in the wake of all this brouhaha, asking for him to be
It is not. We only want the Ghanaian people deserve better, and they deserve the truth, and it's the truth we are telling you. Thank you very much.
That report was put together by Favor Nunu there, capturing for you the views of the Workers' Union at BOST, which is in sync, of course, with the majority. So with these opposing factors, what will the minority do? Joseph Opoku Gakpo has been interacting with them in Parliament. He joins me on the telephone line now. Hello, Joseph. Hello, Joseph. If you can hear me, what has been the reaction of the minority?
Well, essentially for members on the minority side, they still hold the view that the third transaction that went on was inappropriate. They think that the circumstances under which the third well was sold to Bovensina and subsequently to Zap Oil is something that was completely out of place and actually not about it. Let's speak to Edward Bauer. He's a member of Parliament for Bongo. You know him as the former spokesperson for the Energy Ministry. He was part of the team that Energy Ministry. He was part of the team that addressed that particular press conference. Honorable, thanks very much for joining us. So we had the majority side earlier in the day indicating that all you did was to create fear and panic when it comes to consumers, at the level of consumers, with the caution that you gave the other time that there's been adulterated and contaminated fuel on the market and that there's no evidence to back that. What do you say to that?
Thank you very much. I think that when the majority says that, for me, it means that they are not even listening to the people who they appointed. One, you remember that BOST initially indicated that they had just taken 100,000 liters of power to, petroleum, substance to the market. Then you had MPA say no, it was 471,000. On your own station, Mr. Tampole said they could not account for about between 40-something or to 50,000 liters of petroleum product.
But there's been an update on that. That's at 5:30 yesterday. A director at the NPA indicated that that has eventually been accounted for, so they have a fair idea. And it was actually sitting at the premises of Zoop Oil, and that what happened was putting together the figures. That's how come that mistake came out.
So the question then you ask, if it has to do with the public, if you listen to our press conference and listen to it very well, we indicated that, look, MPA should take the necessary steps to ensure that the product is recalled. Because if for nothing at all, the fact that the thing got to Zoop Oil, the intention was to discharge it. The intention was to send it to the market. So if by their own, and I don't have a reason to doubt MPA, if you are saying the MPA said that, but the call to do that was necessary, particularly when you had situations where people could go and buy this and it was going to open up their engines to serious risk.
Let's move on to a few other things. They again claim that when it comes to the sale of this contaminated fuel, this is something that's been happening in previous years, even before the PP administration. They said last year it happened to the tune of 39 million, 3.9 million liters that was sold even the year before. And the further claim they make is that this is the highest price that they've sold contaminated fuel for. the 1.3 cities. In previous time, it's been sold something in the region of 0.75 to 0.90 cities. And so they have saved the nation a lot more resources in that regard.
Let me tell you something. What the MPP is doing, and it's so unfortunate, is to confuse the public. There's a difference between what we call slop and this contamination that we are dealing with. Slops are produced every day. They come about based on the operations of BOST. Slops basically are that, you know, when you go to the various depots, you have tanks. These tanks could be used to store maybe petrol, diesel, kerosene, and what have you. Assuming that they put in petrol, and then the next time they are going to put in diesel, what it simply means that they need to clean the tank. So it is done with water and some other, the product that they are bringing in.
So your point is that previously it was a slop that was actually sold, not contaminated.
But you know what?
Does it make a difference?
It makes a difference. The contaminated products, slops are not treated at the refinery. They are not treated at the refinery. The contaminated products, or generally off-spec products, can be treated at the refinery. So that's the difference. And the truth of the matter, if you look at the invoices that were written to Movimpina, they described this particular product as slop and decided to sell it as such. So I'm not surprised that the MPP will still be talking about the fact that the prices were even better, because the truth of the matter is that this was not slop.
Okay. The final bit, they've launched the defense for how come we see a situation where these companies were not registered and were not even licensed by the NPA. They say a lot of the companies that buy whether slop or contaminated oil are usually not registered, and so this is not the first time such a thing is happening. That's the defense they give for this, and so it's not so much of a big deal as you have sought to paint it. You're the minority.
Again, it is because if today, Joe, as I talk to you, excuse my language, I describe you as a woman and treat you as such, definitely you think that what I need to do to a woman is what I should do to him. The thing is that they decided to define the contaminated product as slop and treated it as such. Contaminated product, if they are off-spec products, anybody knows that anybody who has to carry this must be a licensed BDC per the NPA law, because this can be treated and sold at the depots. But you are selling it to a company that did not have a license. They then in turn sold it to another company that didn't also have a license. So under this, and these are facts that have been established. NPA knows the difference between sales of slops and then that of this. But NPA still came out in their statement, and you remember that yes, they have been able to establish that Movimpina was unlicensed and Zoop Oil was unlicensed. If that particular information was not significant, NPA wouldn't have wasted their time to issue a statement on that.
Just a final one. They say that there are cases of corruption at the level of the BOST under the watch of the NDC administration, which is how come with all these press conferences you are trying to cover. In fact, they make specific reference that an amount of close to 22 million was moved from BOST to the presidency, claiming it was for security operations, and they don't know what exactly the money was used for. They say there's been 39 million that's been used to build an office complex, which they think is very much on the high side. How do you respond to these concerns that there was a lot of corruption at BOST and the former director, which you, the minority, are trying to cover up?
That's shameful. That's disgraceful. I do not for a moment want to defend if there was something untoward done between 2008 or 2009 and 2016. I do not for a moment want to defend that. If the NPP feels so strongly that something went wrong, I don't have a problem. They should go ahead and prosecute people. But I'm saying that with this current one, it's a specific problem that we need to deal with. Why are they trying to equalize?
Was the corruption real? At least.
No, I don't know. Why did they have to wait till we blew the cover on this Movimpina before they started talking about this? Is it equalization? That's shameful.
Many thanks for speaking to us. That's Edward Bauer. He's the Member of Parliament for Bongo, reacting to the concerns raised by the majority at the press conference earlier today. Back to you, Gifty.
We will definitely be getting back to you, Gakpo, for some more on another story that is related to Parliament. But before we go back to Gakpo for that, because there has been a development on that matter in Parliament, the Ghana Integrity Initiative is charging government to stick to its timelines regarding the passage of the Rights to Information Bill. The comment comes as government promises to ensure that the bill is passed by the end of the year. I'm talking about the RTI bill. It has been in Parliament for over 10 years, and civil society groups are worried that the delay delay in passing it into law infringes on the right of Ghanaians to information. In an interview with Beatrice Edu, the program's officer of the GII, Mary Ada, said time is now to stop the talk and act.
Let me say we are a little apprehensive because we have had assurances of similar nature in the past, and the coalition has waited and waited and waited over a decade to get this bill passed. But however, let me also quickly say that because of the stage which the RTI bill got to in Parliament, in the last Parliament, we are, even though apprehensive, hopeful that we would get it passed in the tenure of this Parliament. As to whether it will be passed this year is the other issue. But then we hope that it is done, because we are hoping so, because we had a president who campaigned that that would be one of the first laws he would have passed. And so we are holding the president to that promise, and we continuously remind him. Recently, civil society organizations who concentrate on governance issues met with the president, and that was one of the issues we put across. And the promise was made again that the law would get passed. But then we know that political talk and action are different things. Usually they say one thing and do the other, so we wait to see. But we are very sure that in this current Parliament, the law would get passed. It is not just the RTI. There are many other laws which we need passed if we are going to fight corruption effectively.
Indeed, and I was coming to that, especially the interception of postal packets and telecommunication messages bill. That's also a very relevant bill, looking at the kind of society we are in now, terrorism, trafficking. Sometimes the argument is that you're over-concentrating on RTI when there are some other important bills that also need to be passed.
Exactly. Apart from that, we know the YOCO, the FIC, that's the Financial Intelligence Center, are doing some fantastic jobs around the money laundering issue, around the getting information accessible online and also through posts. Unfortunately, our laws as they stand do not support them to do their work very well. But let me say quickly that on that front, FIC is doing a brilliant job as the Financial Intelligence Center. Their mandate, apart from working to ensure that finance intelligence is upheld in Ghana, they also work closely with the YOCO to ensure that financial crimes are not perpetuated.
Now, you talked about enough talk about the RTI as well as some other bills. Do you think is needed to ensure that the RTI as well as other important bills are passed as soon as possible?
Thank you. What we expect to see is action, because usually the rhetoric is too much, and we have complained about that in the past. So now we want to see commitments as to action plans. We want this bill passed. By December, it should be passed. Then the president gives the opportunity to Parliament, so the processes should be put in place. And these processes which are triggered should be seen to be working. We should see Parliament already having the bill returned to them. I know for a fact that the AG has made some inputs into the RTI, particularly the conduct of public officers and also the witness protection bill. These have started, that process has started, and it's supposed to go to cabinet. At the level of cabinet, they also go through to make their inputs. Then it goes back to Parliament. We should have some timelines, agreed timelines, based, if even they are even tentative, but then that shows commitment, that the people who are put in places of governance who are supposed to help us facilitate and promote the fight against corruption are seen as doing something. So the timelines are critical.
That is the Ghana Integrity Initiative speaking there on the back of concerns that have been raised over allegations that some parliamentarians have received monies by the NLA in consideration of a bill that was brought before them. And organizations similar to GII, like the Media Foundation for West Africa, have also been speaking about how long it takes for bills like the RTI to be passed in Parliament because they lack such sponsorship, so to speak.
Well, one must definitely be concerned when pieces of legislation such as one that will grant access to citizens to be able to have assert that fundamental right of accessing information takes such a long time to get passed by the people who have been elected to represent the interest of the citizenry. Governments upon governments have been talking about the need for transparent governance, promises about accountability, promises about fighting corruption, and so on and so forth. But in my view, perhaps the most fundamental piece of legislation that would help in the fight against corruption, would help mobilize citizens to be involved in governance, and would help citizens to be active in the governance processes is the right to information law. Now, governments upon governments have talked about, well, governance is not about the people who have been elected, the president and the ministers and so on and so forth, and that governance is about the people. Now, if governance is about the people, then of course people need information, people need to be knowledgeable, people need to be informed to be able to make whatever contributions they have to make. But if we are in a situation where citizens don't have that legal right to be able to say, I am applying to get this information, and the people who must provide it are legally obliged to do so, then of course I don't think that the governments have always taken us serious. And that also goes back to the people that we have elected, you know, to represent us in Parliament, because they have the power to make the laws, to pass laws, and so on and so forth. So it's obviously disturbing.
So you don't think that there is enough commitment despite the assurances?
I think that if there was that commitment, it would have been passed by now, even though sometimes we've had parliamentarians say, well, it is also because of the way civil society has behaved over the years that, well, a draft will go to Parliament and civil society will protest and say it's not good enough, and therefore it comes back to civil society for inputs, and then it goes back. But with where we got to, I remember it was on the last day of the last Parliament that the then majority, now minority, were pushing that the bill should be passed on that day. And I was wondering, if it was at a stage where it could have been passed, why should it wait till the very, very last day, you know, of Parliament for it to be pushed to be passed? And that for me is a betrayal of commitment. Perhaps it was just to do something to show that, well, as MPs we are concerned, or as majority at that time we are concerned. And then I was also wondering why the minority at that time also resisted. Well, the new administration has made promises that the bill will be passed before the end of this year. I, at this stage, haven't seen or heard any work being done, because with the new administration, what it means is that it has to go back to the Attorney General, it has to go back to Cabinet before it comes back to Parliament. And if indeed it was going to be passed before the end of this year, I'm sure that we would have seen some processes already taking place.
Mr. Brimer, it is true that it's taking more than 10 years to get this bill passed, but as of December 2016, if I remember correctly, there were about 24 amendments to be made to this particular bill. Don't you agree that they really must do a thorough job before they pass it?
Well, that is right, but what is also true is that we are not seeking to reinvent the wheel as a country. There are international best practices. Right to information legislation is not something that only Ghana is seeking to introduce. Around the world, there have been so many countries that have adopted right to information law. In fact, the Swedish right to information law has been more than 200 years.
Suleiman Ibrahima speaks for the Media Foundation for West Africa. Let's now return to the substantive issue of how bills get through to Parliament and how well they do. How do they fare without such sponsorship? That is the example of the RTI. But calls are rife for independent investigations into allegations that monies were accepted by parliamentarians on the Finance Committee in the 6th Parliament over a bill brought by the NLA, and that it amounts to bribery. They are calling for an investigation into such issues. Now, Parliament today has been reacting to the matter amidst calls by 3 anti-corruption agencies for the House to allow an external body to investigate it. The Ghana Integrity Initiative, together with the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, the CDD, and of course the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, GACC, in a joint statement have been arguing that an external body handling the most recent allegation could be a sure way the Parliament can dispel notions that members are corrupt. Parliament's Director of Public Affairs, Kate Addo, tells JoyNews that there could be a challenge over legalities of such an external investigation on parliamentarians. She is also raising issues about how concerned the House is whether or not such investigations are permitted by rules of the House. We'll be listening to Kate Addo on that issue, but let's get to Parliament, where Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is still standing by with some responses, of course, on this matter, because it did come up on the floor of Parliament. What we do know at this point is that the members are considering inviting the National Lottery Authority over this allegation, and Gakpo has more on this. Hello, Gakpo.
Hello, Gifty, I can hear you.
Great. If you can hear me, we've already indicated what we know at this point, that the House is considering bringing the NLA in to explain how the money's changed hands and all the details that, of course, a lot of Ghanaians are eager to know. Bring us up to speed. What more did they say about it?
Well, and so earlier today, the majority leader, Oseiche Mensah-Bonsu, put out what is described as the business statement, which is the outline of activities for next week. And in the midst of that, there were questions from MPs. And the Member of Parliament for Futu, Alexander Fenyo-Marquins, put a question to the majority leader, asking him whether the House would at any point in time consider getting officials of the NLA to come out and get to Parliament to explain this particular issue regarding whether the money was given to the committee or whatever may have happened over this whole, what has been described as the financial scandal. The majority leader indicated that this is something that is not actually planned for yet when it comes to the business activities for next week, but he indicated that they see this as a very serious issue and they would be considering it at that level as to which form any such discussion on it should take. One of the concerns that Alexander Fenyo-Marquins raised was that there's been commentary on the issue from the Public Affairs Director of Parliament, and he sees some of the reactions that have come as quite unsatisfactory, and so at one point in time they need to get someone to come clarify things. Let me just get the thoughts of another Member of Parliament, this time around from the opposition side. Richard Koshiga is the MP for the Keta constituency, and so your colleague is suggesting that NLA officials should actually be brought in to come clarify the issues. The leader has indicated that this is something that is being considered and it will be looked at the leadership level. Is that the way to go? Others have called for an independent probe instead of Parliament even wanting to question anyone over this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Clearly, I think the suggestion is very much in place for the NLA officials to come and speak to this matter. But I think we've been hearing them speak to the matter in public. And so one may not be expecting anything very different from what they have been putting out in the public domain.
Do you find that satisfactory, at least the feedback that's come? We've all heard from the NLA, we've heard from Parliament's PR and all of that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no complicity anywhere. I think that it has been clearly indicated that there was no bribery activity actually took place. Now, you see, I don't belong to that committee, but these are members who were on recess, and people have gone to their various constituencies, and the NLA want this business done. They want a finality to be put to their document before it can come to Parliament. And of course, if it delays, what it means, therefore, is that it's going to affect some policies that they need, policy directions of that establishment. And clearly the reason for which they thought that if Parliament at that time could not finance it because it was probably financially constrained, they could do that. The reason for which they had asked members to come from their various constituencies, to take part in a certain process, as it were, to cross the T's and the dots, to put a document in a certain state before it comes to Parliament. If members could have chosen to say that, okay, well, now we are in our constituencies, this is going to be too difficult for us, it's too burdensome, and we are on recess. When Parliament resumes, we can go into this business as long as Parliament is going to put in place all the needed structures and processes, to facilitate members, engaging in that business, But I think that it was because of timeliness, the reason for which the NLA officials thought that they must get this thing done now. And so, in essence, they decided to finance it. I don't see the...
Something very brief. Yeah. An independent probe is being called for. Would you as parliamentarians support that? Something beyond Parliament as an institution?
Well, anything that will unearth the truth. You see, because this, what is happening is that anything about Parliament or about MPs these days, tend not to smell very well, it's very offensive to a lot of people. And I think that there's too much wrong perception, being fed out to the public. And then again, when one issue comes up, sometimes it's exaggerated, people don't investigate it, people don't actually go into the nuances of it, and then before we say jack, the whole story becomes so murky and convoluted, and nobody tend to really understand what the crux of the matter is.
An independent investigation can
Well, an independent investigation can certainly, but again, like was mentioned, these are decisions for the Speaker to take.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. And so that's the Member of Parliament for the Keta constituency, Richard Koshiga there. Back to you, Gifty.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is our parliamentary correspondent, bringing us up to speed on that matter. So at this point, we do know that this issue has been mentioned in Parliament, and the officials and members in the House are hoping to invite the NLA on the back of that issue. So how far will this case go? Of course, we've seen one of similar cases, and we know how it all ended. Justice Emil Short is former commissioner for the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. He joins me on the line. Hello, sir. Thank you very much for your time here on the show.
Good afternoon.
A lot of people have been describing this in ways that I would say fits in their own explanation of what the situation really is. Would you describe this as bribe?
Well, it has always been my policy not to give an opinion on the legality of conduct that is under investigation. Because of my previous position, any opinion I express has a potential of compromising or prejudicing any investigation. So I always never give a verdict or an opinion on a matter that is under investigation.
Okay. But then we're all talking about getting an independent investigator, but then there have also been concerns that parliaments or parliamentary rules may not necessarily permit such investigations. And we saw what happened with the infamous Ayariga case. Who is independent? Who can investigate this matter, if at all it will happen, and if at all the rules of Parliament will allow it to?
Well, my understanding was that since this matter occurred during the previous Parliament, the standing regulations of Parliament do not permit the present Parliament to look into it. I'm not sure about that. But did I hear you say that the Speaker of the present Parliament has invited the NLA to Parliament?
The House is considering such an invitation so that they can brief the House on exactly what transpired, and perhaps we can have a better understanding. That's the latest we know about this matter from Parliament.
Well, in that case, I think we should all wait and see how Parliament handles it. And so if it is handled satisfactorily, then, of course, there might be no need for an independent body to look into it. But if it is not handled satisfactorily, then there may be several options.
The last time we spoke, The last time this
Yes.
issue, a similar issue came up, we spoke to the Shraj. We had something that sounds similar to what you're saying right now. But is it that the independent investigative committee that is supposed to look into this will never happen, perhaps, and so Ghanaians will perhaps just have to accept this as it is and just see it as normal and just move on?
Well, I think that would be unfortunate. I think that if Parliament decides that it has the authority to look into it, let's give Parliament the benefit of the doubt this time and see what it does. On the other hand, if Parliament does not do a good job of it, or the public is not satisfied as to how it has handled it, there are many other options. Now, if the allegation in this case is that the money that was paid was a bribe, then it's a criminal matter which can be investigated by Shraj or Yoko, and I think that would be one route to go. On the other hand, if there is this wider issue about when institutions organize seminars or workshops and parliamentarians have to attend, whether it has been the convention for the institutions to pay money to the MP, either as per diem or allowance or whatever. So I think that another alternative would be for the president to establish a committee of inquiry under the Constitution. I think it's Article 296 of the Constitution, which empowers the president to appoint a committee of inquiry in any matter of public interest. And this definitely is a matter of public interest. And if such a committee is appointed with, top-level representatives of certain institutions forming the committee, like what was established for the Constitutional Review Commission, then this body can look not only at this NLA matter, but also the wider issue of the allegation that, parliamentarians always demand payment when they are invited to workshops organized by certain institutions, some MDAs, and so on. So these are the other options that will be available, depending on how Parliament handles the matter. I know that a lot of people will be skeptical about Parliament handling this matter because the Yarga matter was not handled to the satisfaction of many people. In the first place, the terms of reference were limited. Secondly, the rules of procedure did not allow witnesses to cross-examine each other. And also, you can see that at the end of it, Ayarga was surprised when he was asked to apologize. He said, well, if you say I should apologize, I'm apologizing. So he was not satisfied with the outcome. And so it did not generate sufficient confidence in the public and in, the minority as to how the matter has been handled. But if this Parliament has the mandate, the authority under a standard regulation to look into something like this that happened in the previous Parliament, then my position would be, let's give this Parliament the benefit of the doubt. It might adopt, it might try to do a better job this time. And if not, then there are other options which I have mentioned.
Okay. All right. We'll say a very big thanks to you, Sir Justice Emil Short, is former commissioner of the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice there, bringing this into perspective and saying that the president does have the power. The Constitution does give the president the power to put together a committee that can be that independent committee that will look into this matter. But that is the issue that we took to Kate Addo, who speaks for Parliament, and this was her response.
This is not the best news that any institution would like to, receive on any kind of day. So obviously, any news that seeks to, put Parliament in a not so good state, especially where the citizens that the Parliament represents are concerned, is a matter of major concern to the institution of Parliament. But you see, the institution of Parliament is a human one. It's an evolving one. every day we learn new things. So these are things that inform, our subsequent actions or inactions. So while we see the negatives, we also see the positives in these experiences. Ghanaians have become very, very discerning. You can no longer, just give anything to Ghanaians and expect that they will take it hook, line, and sinker. Questions will be asked. So as representatives of the people, we are being made more aware of the fact that any action or inaction by the institution of Parliament and by the membership of Parliament will be questioned by Ghanaians. So we are looking at the glass as being rather half full than rather half empty.
There are some who say it's not wrong to even look at it as half empty if we have to go by that. The reason being that with the current developments, it's something that's happened sometime in 2016. So it has been a long time. So it means that there could perhaps be other incidents that may have happened that are just not in the public domain. How do you react to that?
You see, I must also put it on record that parliamentary procedures and traditions are such that you cannot hold a parliament liable for the actions of a previous parliament. Now, you rightly said this happened in 2016. It was in the life of a 6th parliament under different leadership and a different speakership. Now, we are in the 7th parliament. Ordinarily, what will happen is that the 7th parliament will not even comment on actions of the 6th parliament at all, especially in terms of taking concrete decisions. But we also recognize that allegations of corruption or perceptions of corruption is not something that you want to sweep under the carpet, and that's not what we have sought to do. We recognize the challenges that the